Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture and welcome to another weekly roundup of Doctor Who news and tidbits. As usual, there will be timestamps in this video so you can jump about to the things you're interested in. Before I get started, just a big thank you to anybody who came and said hello to me at MCM Comic Con in London this weekend. I was there on the Sunday. It was a wonderful day. I got to see so many Daleks. If anyone went over to the Project Daleks section, where they had so many Daleks, all different shapes, all different sizes and colours, amazing. They had a Davros performer there who was absolutely fantastic. And of course I got to see the wonderful Ellie Jolly and Crystal D, who I may or may not have filmed some content with, so keep an eye on her Instagram page and mine as well. Maybe some fun things will show up. Also, another week, another episode of Strictly Come Dancing, where Alex Kingston is a contestant this year, if you didn't already know. It was week 5 this week, it was Icons week, and her icon was Dolly Parton. And when I tell you she embodied the role of Dolly Parton, it was incredible. She fully embraced it when she was playing Miranda Priestley a couple of weeks ago for Movie Week. Icons Week was no different. She looked fantastic. Can I just say she looks amazing every single week. They all look amazing, but my goodness, she looked incredible. She was 4th place on the leaderboard this week, although technically it was 3rd place because there were 2 couples that were in joint 2nd place. So if you look at the scores, she had the 3rd highest score this week. Next week is Halloween themed. I don't know what dance she is dancing as of this moment. It has not yet been announced, but I'm so excited. I'm excited to see what she's dressed as, who she's dressed as, and of course, make sure if you can, you are voting for Alex Kingston. Not an ad. I just want Alex Kingston to remain in the competition, if for nothing else, for me to give you these weekly updates. Anyway, moving on. But the main thing I want to talk to you about, and I'm sure many of you have seen this yourselves, is that Carole Ann Ford has confirmed the original ending for season 2. We'd had rumours, we'd had maybe some confirmation via the mother of the young actress that played Baby Poppy over on social media that these rumours of this other ending might have been true. But we now have confirmation from Carole Ann Ford herself that there was in fact a different ending filmed for season 2 of Doctor Who revolving around Susan and Baby Poppy, which we never got to see. On top of this, obviously, there was rumours that there were reshoots happening, which we now know was true. There was an image released by Disney Plus that was presumably a still from the ending of the reality war that turned out to never be seen in the reality war, hence why more rumours that there was a different ending recorded, and full-on descriptions of this ending, as I say, that were previously sort of confirmed to be true by the mother of the young actress playing Poppy. So a lot of things circling around that the ending we saw was not the original ending, and it's basically true. As I say, Carole Ann Ford has confirmed this to be true. Susan herself, I mean, if it's literally coming straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. During an interview, Carole Ann Ford described this unseen ending for the finale of season 2, and this is what she said. "You didn't see the episode which was to sort of introduce my coming back, where I was holding hands with a beautiful little tiny black child 3 years old, and we were watching through the window somewhere where the audience wasn't supposed to know where we were supposed to be. And we were watching my newly embodied grandfather, who is now Shooty, and watching him have a wonderful time singing and dancing in a party in a shop opposite where we were. And obviously I, my character Susan, was longing to just go there and fling her arms around her grandfather and say, 'Grandfather, how lovely to see you after all this time. And how did you survive your floating about in space? And why have you changed?' Anyway, that original ending was unfortunately not to be, for reasons I know and will not disclose." Well, shall we just start with the obvious? We all know. We all know these reasons you're not going to disclose, okay? You know, it's pretty obvious at this point. We've done a whole video on this whole timeline, but the lowdown really being, Ncuti Gatwa decided to leave the show, reshoots had to happen to accommodate a regeneration. In doing so, that scene was cut and a new ending was placed onto the episode. Simple as. Hearing this, having had time to think about it, there are several questions that I have. Some of these may not be new questions because, as I say, we've spoken about this whole situation in quite some detail. But now that we have confirmation of it, I still have some questions. First and foremost, if they had to change the ending to accommodate a regeneration, Fair enough, they had to alter things. First question, why did they leave Susan in the Interstellar Song Contest? Because it was very clear that that was setting something up. And if you then had to change the ending of the reality war and Susan was no longer a part of it, it's sad. But what was more sad is the fact that you teased us with You teased us with Susan earlier on, and then nothing came of it. So in my mind, once the decision was made that the ending was going to be changed and reshoots would have to happen regardless to create a different ending, then why not change who appeared to the Doctor during that scene in the Interstellar Song Contest? Because I think that was the most disappointing thing, is that we were led to believe Susan was going to be returning, and that's all we got because of the reshoots. So I feel like, yes, you did need something to trigger the Doctor to keep fighting and live and survive and all that. Fair enough. But I feel like having it as Susan and then not having Susan later on was a real letdown. It could have been Ruby. It could have been Rogue, who we then saw again in Wishworld. So, you know, if you'd already had a little snippet of flash from Rogue later on, it actually would have made sense if it was Rogue. Or Ruby, as I say. But having it as Susan, then not seeing Susan later on was a big disappointment. So that's the first question. If you're going to reshoot the ending, why not also retroactively go back and reshoot whoever's popping up to the Doctor there, now that you're not having Susan in the reality war? Question 2. If you had to alter the ending to accommodate a regeneration, why did it mean that the entire situation revolving around Susan and Poppy had to also be written out entirely? Surely there was a way that you could have had the ending changed to be a regeneration story and still have had the tease of Susan's return as well. That absolutely could have happened. I have a plot that could have worked here, okay? Just picture this, if you will. We get to the end of what we think the end, everyone's saved, everyone's back. Ruby points out, Poppy's not here. I promise you had a daughter, her name was Poppy. Okay, the Doctor decides, I'm going to sacrifice myself to bring Poppy back. Cool, brilliant. Does so, but instead of running through the door, finding Poppy and discovering that she is not in fact his daughter, but Belinda's daughter, have him run through the door and for Belinda to still go, who's Poppy? And for him to go into his regeneration believing that he had failed, only for a mid-credit scene to reveal Susan and baby Poppy somewhere watching on. Dun dun dun! Turns out, Doctor, you didn't fail. Because look, they're fine. And what's going to happen next season? We're going to explore Susan looking for her grandfather, but now not knowing what he looks like because she's just seen him begin to regenerate. You could have had basically both of those stories merged into one. You didn't need to sacrifice one for the other. You could have altered one slightly to accommodate both, is all I'm saying. And here's the thing, you know, we've joked about and spoken about seriously to some degree this idea of absolute content from Russell T Davies. And you can see that that's probably a big reason why Billie Piper was chosen to be the face at the end of the regeneration. But quite honestly, regardless of whether we'd seen who Ncuti regenerated into or not, I think having the Susan twist at the end could have also been a great absolute content moment. A moment that everyone had been waiting for, a moment that was intended to be the ending of the episode as it initially was written. It just raises so many questions as to why they decided to completely scrap that ending, rather than just rework the ending to suit that cliffhanger and a regeneration at the same time. I mean, I just came up with a pretty decent plot there, I'd like to think, in about 5 minutes. So it really does raise the question as to why that wasn't the route they went down. The thing is as well is it's not as if it wouldn't have worked moving forwards. The Doctor changes their face. That's literally the nature of the character. It has been the case for the show for the last 60 plus years. So it's not like it wouldn't have been able to continue and Susan looking for the Doctor wouldn't have been a storyline that could have continued had the Doctor changed their face. It makes no difference, it's the same character. So Ncuti leaving really shouldn't have made a difference to that particular storyline. It might have added a layer to it, but like I said, by Susan now having to kind of go back to square one to figure out what the Doctor looks like now. But I feel like there was a whole storyline there that could have been so interesting. Try to figure out, who is Poppy? Is Poppy somehow, does she still exist even though she's from a world that didn't exist? You know, who is Susan's father? How have we got into this situation where Susan is an old lady and she's there with her mother who is a baby? How does this whole timey-wimey situation pan out? You know, there's still so much that could have been done with it, and I think it could have been a really fun scenario to explore in the next season. And I think that's why everyone was so disappointed that rather than it be reworked, it was completely scrapped. And by them categorically stating that Poppy was in fact 100% human, not the Doctor's daughter, they've completely scrapped that whole storyline. Why? This is the big question. I don't have an answer for you. I'm just asking because I would really like to know what's going on in these writers and showrunners' heads, that they didn't think that through, or they did, but why come to the conclusion that they have to scrap that entire thing? Now, the only thing I can really think of maybe is the uncertainty with regards to the future of the show. And so if you've got Carole Ann Ford, who, you know, in the nicest way possible is getting on a bit, and you've got a young actress who, playing Poppy, who quite possibly will have grown up too much to carry on playing the role by the time the situation is sorted and they know what they're doing with the future of the show. So I guess that kind of makes sense a little bit. But even if Ncuti had stayed, surely from what we're hearing, there would have been a little bit of a waiting game with regards to what was going to happen with the future of the show. So surely they would have known that. It's so confusing. I don't like that there's so much secrecy. Obviously, they don't want to reveal all the things that happen behind the scenes. They want it all to look like a well-oiled machine and everything runs smoothly. But we clearly know that's not the case. And it does just raise so many questions about why they did this, why they did that. What were they thinking? So yeah, I guess, could Susan be potentially explored in the future? Honestly, I think it depends on how soon the future is. As I say, Carole Ann Ford, in the nicest way possible, getting on a bit. The young actress who plays Poppy is going to grow up, and at that age, kids grow up fast. So, you know, if it's revisited in the next year or so, maybe. If they're holding out on, you know, we're going to have 2-3 years before we have new Doctor Who, I don't know that that's going to be revisited, which potentially is the reason why they decided to scrap the whole idea. But it's really sad if that's the case, and it really does highlight the fact that Ncuti leaving has really thrown a spanner in the works, because as we know from previous interviews, it did seem like season 3 was just going to be filmed straight after season 2. It seems like this decision for him to step away has really caused some issues, because all these storylines have now been scrapped. And is that because now we don't know what the hell's going on, and we've got this big gap where there didn't seem to be that lingering beforehand? Something's clearly happened here. So yeah, I think if soon is soon, maybe. If soon is a few years, I don't see them revisiting that, and it's really sad because that was their opportunity and they completely disregarded it. And then there's the question of obviously why Carole Ann Ford has said this and brought this up. To be perfectly honest with you, if she was a little bit mad by it, I wouldn't blame her. If it were me, I'd be mad as well. Obviously, when it's a written interview, you don't know the intonations, you don't know the inflections, you don't know how these things have been said, so it's very easy to take them out of context. So I don't know, you know, what the tone was when she said this. But if she was mad about her whole thing being cut, would you blame her? I wouldn't blame her. It is very frustrating to be finally invited back after all these years. The fans are really excited about it, for it all to be scrapped. At the same time, sometimes I think with the older actors, you know, they just have less of a filter. There's less media training. Nowadays, people have to sign NDAs, they're trained in what they can and cannot say. There's clearly something going on behind the scenes, and they're kind of told and informed what is okay and what's not okay to talk about. Whereas I think some of the actors who maybe aren't really in the industry anymore, have come back for this cameo or asked about things, they just say it how it is. You know, they don't care. They're just going to say it. Having said that, she handled it, I think, pretty well. She said there were reasons that I do know, but I'm not going to disclose. She could have completely revealed everything. And quite honestly, we'd all been very grateful if she had, because at least then we'd have some answers. But, she was delicate enough to not reveal what happened, which that in itself highlights that something's happened. The fact that she's pointed out, there are reasons, I'm not going to talk about them. If it was just a case of, timings, things, the storyline had to change, yeah, clearly something's happened here. It just makes me all the more curious to figure out what the heck is going on behind the scenes in the world of Doctor Who. It's just a little bit mind-blowing, really, isn't it, that we can be in such a mess, and feel so in the dark about the mess at the same time. I think that Susan being wasted in season 2 was probably one of the worst parts of the season. I did an entire ups and downs of season 2 as a whole, which you can watch on our channel, but spoiler alert, the teasing of Susan and then the complete and utter lack of Susan at the end was one of the biggest letdowns this season had. And it now seems like we're not even going to get that story explored. In the very least, I hope at some point, hopefully soon, they release that original intended ending. Even if it's just a little bonus thing, I think we all deserve to see the return of Susan that should have been. Because I think it's unlikely that we are going to see her come back now. I think that's it. I think they had their chance, they muffed it, and the fans deserve to see what could have been. Let me know your thoughts on this situation in the comments down below. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.